Hello, it's good to see you back again here at Bigfoot Lake. Many times we've heard the saying that the love of money is the root of all evil. It's actually even in the Bible. Well, tonight we take some time to dig into a dark secret from America's past. And with that being said, let's dive into tonight's mystery. Jekyll Island. Ever heard of it? Well, it's home to some dark secrets. Let's start by having a look at Jekyll Island today. It's actually a Georgia state park today, with beautiful clubhouse, tennis courts, and a hotel. It's quite beautiful. It wasn't always such a peaceful, remote getaway. The original inhabitants of the island were known as the Timucua. They were a Native American tribe who occupied not only Jekyll Island, but also some of the Florida and Georgia coast. They were once prolific with thousands, but they are no more. Much of what is known about the Timucua has been from what they've left behind, whether it be pottery or their daily instruments or some of their weapons, arrowheads, spears, and a double curved bow, which is very unusual for Native Americans. Many of the buildings you see today on Jekyll Island, they point directly to a Timucua structure of the past. Many were built directly on top of the old foundations of the Timucua structures. At first glance, it almost appears as if the new development was designed to cover up any trace of the natives being there on the island. The Jekyll Island Club, for instance, by itself covers up so much of the Timucua history. Many of the new buildings are like an X marking the spot of an old structure. What has been covered up still gives way to evidence of the past. In the current museum on the island, you can see skeletons on display beneath plexiglass. These are the remains of the Timucua natives. Out of respect, they didn't want to disturb the bodies, so they just covered them up. There's something very unique about these skeletons. It's reported that they are over 8 to 8.5 feet in height. All of the Timucua were in fact tall, including the women, and this is actually an anomaly. Most of the other natives of the surrounding areas of the southeast United States, they're not this tall. The Timucua stand above all the rest. When French explorers arrived on Jekyll Island in the 1500s, they didn't stay long. What they witnessed was so appalling that they left and settled in St. Augustine. What was it that drove the French away so fast? Take a close look at this picture. See that person holding the baby? Notice the others dancing around in the background? Now, look closer. See the stone? That stone is an altar. That stone is a sacrificial altar. The shamans would offer their sacrifices on that stone altar. What were they sacrificing? You probably already guessed. This scene depicts child sacrifice. This type of thing is highly unusual for Native Americans. This is more like the Middle East, with the pagan worship of their gods Molech or Baal by the Canaanites. Now, keep in mind, many of the Timucua structures are simply covered up with modern buildings. As we move back to modern times, remember that altar that we just learned of. Keep that altar in mind. In the early 1900s, very, very wealthy people began developing Jekyll Island. A few of the names you may recognize: J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller. As these wealthy men began building, you may have expected lavish homes, yet they actually built simple cottages, kind of like cabins in the woods for the rich and elite. Rockefeller built his cabin, and it was named Indian Mound Cottage. What was so special about Indian Mound Cottage? Well, in 1910, plans were drawn up in this cottage by Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, and many other wealthy elites. What were these plans? Ever heard of the Federal Reserve? The Federal Reserve isn't a bank. It's the banking system of the United States. In 1910, sitting in the parlor of Indian Mound Cottage, these men created our country's banking system. It was presented to Congress a couple years later in 1912 and signed into law by Woodrow Wilson. Now, think back to this picture. Remember the stone altar? Where do you think it is today? And I'll give you just a moment to think on that. You probably already guessed it. That stone altar is directly under the parlor of Indian Mound Cottage, Rockefeller's home. The Federal Reserve Act was planned and drawn up directly on top of the stone blood sacrifice altar of the Timucuas. Is it any wonder our banking systems are so corrupt? It was conceived in diabolical fashion with a demonic infusion from its very origin. So today, when you see the beauty of Jekyll Island, the amazing clubhouse, the tennis courts, and those quaint, beautiful cottages, ask yourself this question: who in their right mind would build their house on top of a blood sacrifice altar? And now remember, this is the birthplace of our Federal Reserve banking system. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's story. Leave me a comment and let me know what your thoughts are of Jekyll Island. And if you have a story you would like us to share here at Bigfoot Lake, a mystery, unexplainable, perhaps something you've seen, something you've heard, please reach out. We would love to hear from you. Thanks for joining us here. I hope you have a great night, and we'll see you next time at Bigfoot Lake.